Hi guys, my name is Peter Zamborski. I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Management and International Business at the University of Auckland Business School. Today I will talk about industry and competition with a focus on international context. As you can see on the picture, some companies such as Apple outcompete others, and often not just in their industry, but also in adjacent industries. So let's talk about some of the factors leading to success or failure of these companies. We'll cover models and frameworks such as the 5 forces, the 3 generic strategies, and the international model of configuration and coordination by Mike Porter. We'll finish off with perhaps a more recent topic of smart connected products, such as Tesla, and how they are transforming competition. So let's start with thinking about a company that many of us are familiar with, Subway in the fast food industry. It's an American firm and competes in a number of markets around the world. One thing to understand in the competitor analysis is that there's 2 classes of competitors. Global, to Subway would be companies such as McDonald's or Kentucky Fried Chicken, with whom they compete globally. And then there's local competitors in particular markets or perhaps regions in Australasia or Asia Pacific, where Subway is facing local competition. In New Zealand, for example, there's a burger company called Burger Fuel that's competing in kind of fast food with a bit of a gourmet touch, but in many other markets, Subway would not have to consider that company as a competitor. So the topic of industry and competition is linked to Mike Pink's framework of a strategy tripod. Tripod means 3 legs of competitive and strategic analysis. The first one, most related to the actual competition, is industry-based view, dating back to Mike Porter's work and kind of the industrial economics tradition. From there, in particular in 1990s, we as strategy analysts became much more preoccupied with inside of the firm, looking at the firm resources, and the most recent view, kind of from 2000s on, is the institution-based view, which is looking at the impact of some of the institutions, such as regulations, but also culture, kind of more sociological view of institutions and how that impacts strategy. So today we talk about the first leg of the tripod, the industry-based view, perhaps the most traditional, and some people could say, a bit outdated, but every company needs to consider its competitors and its industry, or think about various definitions of the industry. Okay, so today we're talking about industry-based view, while some of the other mini lectures might talk in more detail about company resources, what's inside a firm, and institution-based view about the rules of the game and how that affects strategy. So Mike Porter's model, we won't get into too much detail, but in terms of its substance, so it's kind of an industry-based view that looks at industry structure, industry competitiveness. Some industries are much more fiercely competitive and harder to make a profit in, while other industries perhaps are less impacted by fierce competition. That obviously depends on the rivalry among competitors as one of the factors, but also is affected by new potential competitors. So that's the threat of new entrants. Then other players that can provide substitutes to the current products in the industry. And then kind of the 2 key business parties to most of the businesses, the buyers and the suppliers and their relative bargaining power. So overall, these 5 factors affect industry competitiveness and the levels of profits in the industry. So if we think about, say, the smartphone industry and companies such as Apple, that is actually one of the few winners in this industry. Apple accounts for a vast majority of profits in the smartphones industry. Even companies such as Samsung or Huawei are actually having really hard time to make a good profit on the smartphones. So what is it? Is it just about the Porter's 5 forces or some internal factors that Apple has developed to distinguish itself from competitors? So you can think about this, and as you later might consider, say, the resource-based view or the capabilities-based view, we might distinguish between just overall competitiveness of an industry and the factors that affect all companies in that industry, and then more idiosyncratic company-specific, firm-specific advantages, such as brand or design that Apple has developed, or the ecosystem that is linked to its app store that make it successful. Now, kind of Porter developed 3 basic concepts in strategy, 3 what he calls generic strategies. So traditionally, a lot of companies obviously want to be quite efficient, and in particular, traditionally in Asia, cost leadership was one of the ways to outcompete your rivals. But you know, in every market, you have Ryanair in Europe in the budget airlines, so you have I don't know, Walmart in the US in the retail sector that are cost leaders. Quite often they serve mass markets, and with large economies of scale, they can have the lower costs. And often they excel in functional areas such as manufacturing or logistics. Now there's other strategies, differentiation and focus, that are based on either product or market segmentation. So for focus, you actually focus on a particular customer segment, while in differentiation, you really have a unique product that could be targeted at a couple of segments. And in both of these areas, the competitive advantages is not that much derived from manufacturing or logistics, but more from R&D, marketing, and sales. And so I already mentioned Ryanair as one of the examples of cost leadership. If you think about Onitsuka Tiger shoes, it's clearly differentiated product, and Embraer's medium-sized aircraft could be considered focus. If you look back, the difference between differentiation and focus, sometimes it's a bit blurred and different people define it differently. But the key thing about focus is that it's focused on one or few segments, while differentiation on a number of segments. So if you look at Onitsuka and Embraer, it's not entirely easy to compare, but the question is whether you focus on one type of customers or whether you focus on a number of segments. So you could argue that for Onitsuka, that could be attractive both to young people, to kind of, you know, also young dads who want to still feel young and wear a cool shoe, both genders. So it could be a unique product, but a couple of markets. Now, in the international arena, there's the model of Porter's configuration and coordination. These 2 concepts could be disentangled and defined as configuration. It looks whether you have your operations and your business geographically concentrated, or dispersed in many nations. That could be broken down to, say, sourcing or production or sales or R&D. Some companies are very concentrated manufacturing just in China. Some companies are very concentrated R&D, such as Apple, mostly in the US. Other companies are much more diversified. So you could look at configuration of various functions, so your whole business, if you want, and coordination, where it looks at whether you have low or high coordination across markets. Are you giving a lot of decision-making power to your subsidiaries? So are you really keeping a close step on what's going on in other countries as part of your network? So that could link to a couple of strategies based on the level of global coordination and international configuration, from multi-domestic, where you don't coordinate much, but you are quite dispersed internationally, to, say, the most complex global integration, where you have a quite high degree of coordination of dispersed operations. Now, let's apply to examples. So we covered a number of models. If you remember, we had Porter's generic strategies. We had Porter's 5 forces. Now we had coordination and configuration. So you might think about successful companies such as Harley-Davidson and try to pick framework to analyze its success, and any of these frameworks to a degree is applicable. So the beauty is that they're quite general, quite universal, adaptable. You need to understand, your suppliers, your buyers. Support this framework, obviously important for Harley-Davidson. You also need to think about how geographically they have spread their operations. They've got some operations in Brazil and Europe as well, in terms of production, strong sales there as well. So you could look at how much they coordinate, they disperse the operations, and then pick the right model. Obviously it's quite a differentiated product, perhaps with a number of market segments. So you could apply any of the 3 frameworks. I'll finish off with some of the more recent work by Mike Porter and his co-author, who's more of an IT guy. So this article from the Harvard Business Review is about smart connected products and how they transform competition. It's just pointing to the fact that industry boundaries are now much more fluid. You need to think more about kind of ecosystems and what they call in this article technology stacks. Say if you think about, I don't know, John Deere tractors, now these tractors are often also linked to kind of farm management systems. You're not just competing in the tractor industry, but competing kind of a broader say farm management industry. You need to have products that are linked to, now the 5G networks and Industry 4.0, where a lot of what we thought about as kind of discrete industries will be now linked to through technology to other industries and networks. So some of the examples of companies that are quite successful in reaching out through the industry barriers and forming these technology stacks. Tesla, obviously, but also the companies such as Babolat in the tennis industry, which has kind of some technologies within the tennis racket that helps you to measure your performance, or smart apparel, Ralph Lauren, etc., etc. If you want to learn more about these issues about industry and competition, you can check my free e-textbook, International Business and Global Strategy, that's available on bookboon.com. And then there's also 2 more advanced, more in-depth textbooks that I wrote or co-wrote, Global Strategy published by Tophead, where there's some more recent examples and in-depth coverage. And if you want to look at the context of the Asia Pacific, one of the most important sources of growth in today's world economy, you can look at the contemporary international business in the Asia Pacific region, where some of these topics are covered in more depth. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you learned a bit about industry and competition.